Hey everybody, it's great to see you today. Welcome to Living Power, your online Bible study. We're walking through the Bible in a year. Today is October 22nd, and we are in the Gospels. We're looking at the life of Jesus, and today I'd like us to focus on three of the stories that was in our reading today. We're going to look at this conversation between James, John, and Jesus. We're going to look at two other things, Jesus and Zacchaeus. And then we're going to look at the story of the 10 servants. So that's kind of what I thought we would do in our time together today. First, let's start with this conversation between James and John and Jesus. And the sons of Zebedee, James and John, come to Jesus and they ask him a question. It's a question that you or I could very well ask him, and that is, when you sit on your throne, we want to sit in places of honor next to you. It sounds like a very reasonable question. However, Jesus replied in a very unfamiliar way. But if you understand the way that the kingdom of God works, you understand how much sense it makes. Jesus came to serve, not to be served. And he came to redeem the world and had to partake in a huge cup of suffering. He requires his followers to do the same thing. And he has said that over and over in different ways. And basically what he's telling James and John here is, if you want to receive honor in my kingdom, then what you need to do is lay down your life for me and for others. It's the whole love God, love people, once again. And what they didn't realize was that Jesus was granting their request and that they would come to live, I won't say very difficult lives, but you'll surely agree with me that James was the first disciple that was martyred in Acts 12, right before Peter was imprisoned. And John spent his last remaining years exiled on an island. And so he didn't really have any freedom at that point either. And this is, the way that all of the disciples, in one sense or another, ended their lives. I think we've talked about that in a prior lesson as well, what happened to the disciples. In this story is the summary verse of Mark. If we were to summarize his whole gospel, it would be in Mark 10:45, which reads, "For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others, and to give his life as a ransom for many." That is the kingdom definition of greatness, and it is totally opposed to the worldly definition of greatness. The world tells us that we're number one. Have it your way. It's all about us. And the world totally gets us focused on self. But the kingdom of God is the exact opposite, and it's about serving and being selfless and thinking of others. So there's a word in the Greek in this summary verse. It's goel, and it actually it's the word for ransom, and it actually means to free by means of paying a price. And it infers in the word that there would be someone, a person, is acting as an intermediary. So I thought this would be a good time to talk to you about the concept of kinsman redeemer. We saw this in the book of Ruth, but let's review just a minute the concept of kinsman redeemer. Jesus was a kinsman redeemer to us. Boaz in the story of Ruth was a kinsman redeemer to Ruth. There are two aspects, qualifications if you will, in being a kinsman redeemer. First of all, you have to be kinsman. You have to be a relative. And secondly, in order to be redeemer, you have to have the resources. You have to be able to redeem for whatever it is. So in the Old Testament, a lot of times you would redeem land or redeem property. In this case, Jesus redeemed us as our kinsman redeemer because he was kin. It was one of the reasons why God sent him to be born as a human. That satisfied the kinsman part. And then the Redeemer part, he had to be able. He was sinless, and he was the only qualified one to redeem us back into fellowship with God. So I thought that was, it's just really interesting to study about kinsman redeemer and actually what that means. So I thought this would be a good time to review the whole concept of the word ransom. Now, let's look at the second story we're going to talk about today, Jesus healing blind Bartimaeus. Oh, no, that's not the one we're going to cover. We are going to cover this one on the next page, Jesus and Zacchaeus. Remember in Sunday school the little tune, Zacchaeus was a wee little man and a wee little man was he. He climbed up in a sycamore tree for the Lord he wanted to see. I don't remember the rest of it. Maybe you do, and you certainly don't want me to sing it for you. But Zacchaeus was a chief tax collector. And the way that tax collecting worked in Rome and in Judea was Rome would hire people, could be you, could be me, to be tax collectors. We would agree with Rome, we're going to pay you this flat amount. And that's what we owed Rome. But we could collect any amount we wanted to from the people. And guess who gets to keep it? We would get to keep any excess that we collected from the people over and above the part that we had negotiated to pay Rome. So this explains this antagonism between the people and the tax collectors, because over and over and over again we see the Pharisees and others calling the tax collectors sinners, and it was because they had this animosity. I don't really think it was common knowledge what the percentage was, but that the tax collector would pay Rome, because I'm under the impression that was negotiated. However, it was common knowledge that they were charging very high interest in order to make themselves wealthy. And many of the tax collectors that we read about in the Bible were certainly wealthy. That's how it happened. So this is how we can kind of understand the people's attitude with Jesus. Why are you associating with him? And the people's attitude was very off-putting and very disengaged. But Jesus embraced this man. He was very accepting and compassionate. And when they had this conversation, Jesus and Zacchaeus, the response of Zacchaeus was amazing. He displayed concern for the poor. He displayed a repentant heart. Do you know what was so significant about his response when he says, if I've cheated people on their taxes, I will give them back 4 times as much? That is the key here to understanding how repentant he really was. If we go back to the law in Leviticus and Exodus, you'll remember that Leviticus said, under the law, a thief had to confess and give back 20%. But in Exodus 22 verse 1, there were stipulations where if something happened to you, or if you did something to someone, you might have to pay as much as, but not exceeding, 4 times as much. 4 times as much was the largest amount that the law ever made anyone pay back. And this person knew the law, and that's what was so significant. They were saying, I'll repay the exact, even if the law doesn't say I need to pay 4 times as much, maybe I only, according to the law, need to pay 20%. I will pay the maximum amount. And this is what is so cool about Zacchaeus. Yes, he was a little man, small in stature, but after meeting Jesus, he had a repentant heart, and he was very generous. Jesus called him a true son of Abraham, which simply meant, you get it, that entering into the kingdom of God doesn't have so much to do with lineage as it has to do with faith and a change of heart. So it's faith and obedience, of course, not lineage. Now let's wrap this up today by talking about the story of the 10 servants. I love this story. This is a story about how we invest in this lifetime with what we've been given. I don't think it means necessarily money and resources and those kinds of things. I think it means the investment of the gospel that we understand, and how are we spreading the kingdom and pursuing that cause. This is different from the parable of the talents, because that represented our opportunity to use our gifts and our resources and our abilities in great and expanding ways. This is just a little bit different. This parable of the 10 servants represents how are we busily working to expand the gospel while Jesus is away. And that was a key part of the story. Doing business until he returns again is the key in this story. This story teaches that the king must go away for a while. We wonder, why did Jesus have to go away this long? Well, the story teaches that the king had to go away this long, but he will come back. Charles Spurgeon shared a quote, which I wanted to share with you today, that really kind of sums up the importance of how to wait well in our life today before Jesus returns. Charles Spurgeon says, "Gracious and faithful people obtain more grace and means of usefulness, while the unfaithful man sinks lower and lower. We must make progress." That's the key. Making progress or lose what we've attained. There is no such thing as standing still in Christianity. So we live today in this period where the master is absent, but he will return. So I'm going to leave you with this question today as you think about, for the remainder of the day, the story of the 10 servants. Certainly when you meet your king, your master, you want him to say, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." I know I do as well. So our question today is, what task have you been given during this waiting period? Are you waiting well? And what do you want to be said of you when you meet Jesus face to face? Big and important question to think about. Well, I hope you have enjoyed this lesson today. I hope it's been a blessing to you. We're going to continue in the life of Jesus. We're just about 1 week into his, 1 week before the crucifixion. And so it's going to get very, very exciting, jam-packed over these next couple of days. So I hope you'll join me again tomorrow. Blessings to you. Shalom.